I wanted to express kind of this idea that I've been having, and it's on the theme of artificial intelligence and AI. Obviously, that's like a hot button topic. Everybody's trying to understand where they're at with artificial intelligence and how they can use it to like increase, their productivity, all of these things, sometimes just their ease. A lot of people are worried about kind of the consequences of it, and that's all well and good. I think about the same things. I wonder how to incorporate it so I don't get left behind, but I also try to think about how to incorporate it so it doesn't become a proxy for myself and the way that I think. And that led to kind of this interesting thought and realization, especially with some other things that I've been thinking about recently, especially as it comes to training, because we are constantly trying to model kind of a better way to think about this stuff in order to get people to better places. And I think, honestly, the development of AI is trying to do the same thing. But there's some concepts I think are really interesting. What I'm going to call this is kind of like autonomous intelligence, a different kind of thinking, but using AI as kind of a reflection of what we're doing and how we're learning and how we can improve kind of whatever subject we're talking about. In my case, it's obviously generally geared towards fitness and well-being and health. And so I had some really interesting conversations last night at the Ritual event. Shout out to everybody who helped with that. It turned out phenomenal. We had a great time. It was just an amazing experience. And because of that, we were able to have these like really good, deep conversations, especially regarding kind of how we learn. And this topic came up, and I was thinking about them on my long run today up in the mountains. And, I'm seeing a lot of prompting, like people trying to prompt new ways to use artificial intelligence. And in honesty, it's a reflection of what we try to do with kind of anything that we're doing, whether that's learning fitness or a new skill or acquiring any kind of knowledge and implementing it is really kind of what we're after. And there's all these really clever ways that you can prompt artificial intelligence to give you kind of a better outcome. And that made me really think about how we use exercise or how we use training. And it really is just a better way of prompting. And so I think when people run into dead ends, which you'll see when using like ChatGPT or something, when they're trying to create maybe a picture or a video or, whatever the actual medium is, they put in a prompt and it doesn't work really well. And so they, scour for something else to try to get the intelligence to produce something better. And I want to kind of promote this idea within training, which is every time you step into a session, really what we're doing is trying to find a better prompt. The better prompt has more details, less noise, and it gets to the heart of what you're trying to create, the output. So if we look at why we're kind of enamored with artificial intelligence, it's because it looks like magic, but really it's not. It's just reflecting kind of that same magical quality that we find in creative individuals, which is we don't sometimes understand what inputs lead to what outputs. And so we're really just looking for a predictable nature. I think the best performers in any given subject quite literally just have predictive inputs and outputs, and that's just through trial and error. And as you can see, there's going to be people who are way better at using AI. And I'm going to say it's not because they're lucky or, genetics. It's really because they practice. They really think hard about what thing they're trying to create. They're really considering and contemplating the output, the product that they're trying to get out. Now, if I take this and use this as a model for training, I guarantee it will work. So one of the things that we talk about in our training is not necessarily the output being higher performance, because I think that's where most people are kind of stuck, right? They're using training to just simply improve a metric.
Morning.
Good morning. How are you doing?
How are you?
Yeah, good.
Good.
Take care. So they're quite literally just using one metric such as bigger bench, bigger squat, faster run splits, producing more power. And these measurements are good because then they give us kind of like a feedback of what we're doing is worth the investment. Now, think of a performance metric involved in AI as something simple as like you're getting the result faster. So this is kind of how I correlate the two. A lot of people are just worried about that one metric, but there's a quality, not a quantity, that is very, very important to training. And I think if people don't ever realize or recognize the quality and how to predictably get quality output from their sessions, I think eventually they're going to burn out. They're going to fall apart. That's kind of what we see. About 6 months where people on average can really try hard and put a lot of effort in towards, let's say, getting leaner or improving their strength or something like that. And after 6 months, that one performance metrics dies out and they never learn to look at the quality. But if we look at, something like ChatGPT and the prompting, our prompting it really has to do with quality. And sometimes these bigger engines, they take a lot more time because it's a higher quality output. Now, you can have patience for that because you understand that you can recognize that the quality of like a shitty AI video that kind of doesn't make any physical sense. Of course, that's fast, and it's not also worth looking at other than like a giggle. There's like a lot of people prompting, weird things like human movement doesn't work really well yet in some of these engines, and therefore you have like gymnastics, and their bodies like invert and become mush, or something like that. Well, they happen really fast because the prompting is not clear, and now we're getting to the point where the quality is actually on the question of reality. So if I go back to like how I think about training, mostly what I'm training for is a quality. In the philosophical sense, it's a qualia. It's this idea that I'm experiencing something very, very different. And it's not a performance metric in and of itself, but it leads to greater and greater performance metrics. The difference in this is also kind of like on another subject I've been thinking about, is the difference between methodology and modeling. So most amateurs, and I don't mean that kind of in a derogatory sense, but I say most people who are doing things for the love of are kind of stuck on just methodology. Now, the methodology is really important because it builds the eventual model, but very few people are able to build new models. And this is really what increases the quality of your output. And so to take the AI example again as a metaphor, it's like the first models that we started with, these first versions of ChatGPT, and now who knows how many there are. There's Grok, there's the LLMs, there's all these other ones that you can build on private servers where you can build your own model. And I think the things that you're seeing that are really impressive with AI are because people are taking the time to redo the model, and they're not so worried about the methodology. Once they get the model that's correct, then the methodology matters. But if you're stuck on methodology, you're stuck, period. So it's kind of this inversion flow where I work on the methodology till I get to the limit of the model, and then I reimagine the model so that I can describe or come up with new methodology. In training, this is kind of interesting. And I explained this to somebody last night when they were, inquiring about coming to the gym and hanging out. And it's like, oh, I used to be an athlete. Oh, I used to do this. These are my performance metrics. And I understood this as somebody who's stuck on methodology. So I tried to explain it in maybe the simplest terms possible. Is like, oh, it doesn't really matter at what methodology you've used in the past. It's how open you are to changing the modeling. And this again comes from another great analogy about thinking about how somebody learns or how a system learns. So in kind of like machine learning, it's really interesting because that is kind of the really big engine to these systems growing and developing very, very quickly. Is a machine can kind of on its own do inputs and outputs to figure out what the best methodology is to find the maximum potential of a model. And I think that that is just us. Like we it's nothing artificial about it. It really has more to do with how much autonomy you're going to apply to your own system, to your own inputs and outputs. And that's really what our program has always taught. It's always been about autonomy and intelligent design. And obviously this takes a lot of energy. So you can't do it every day, or at least you're training to try to do it every day. In talking to this potential client that wanted to come train in person at the gym, really what I tried to explain them is like, yeah, there's like exercises. I'm less concerned about what exercises you can do and the potentials of those, because it usually has to do with methodology. Like, don't get me wrong, I think it's like phenomenal, and I've spent a decade trying to lift more weight and express that to different exercises. But really, the thing that I'm really concerned with training, my model now is not necessarily about exercise, it's about exorcism. And I've said that for years because it's kind of funny and it's a joke, but really what that is, I'm trying to get something out of me through training. I know the inputs that work, but I'm really looking for a combination of inputs that extract these qualities of myself. Because again, it's not about the quantity, it's about the quality of behavior that I can extrapolate. Now, the interesting thing about that is that is a learning system. That is machine learning. I'm just the machine. Instead of putting it into a computer, I just have to press go. So any kind of machine kind of does the work to figure out a solution to the problem. That's kind of what defines a useful machine. And I think most people have given up their ability to do the work or even start. Therefore, they can't learn. They can't learn to change the model. Therefore, they're obsessed with methodology. And this is where most people get stuck. There's a lot of argument about, should I lift weight? Like, is the traditional S&C the right way? Is functional patterns the right way? Is functional range conditioning the right way? Is the Legray or Pilates method the right way? Well, all of these methodologies are generally stuck on the quantity of what you're doing. And really what I want people to understand is although you will see similar exercises and prompts in our design, really what we're trying to extrapolate is a quality from people, a behavior trait. And that is really what becomes, it bridges the gap when we're talking about artificial intelligence and I would say autonomous intelligence. It's the uncanny valley, right? The part where you don't understand which part is the entity that is not you. And what I mean by that is, if I am, let's take a behavior trait that we train quite frequently, which is creativity. I train this physically, and a lot of people maybe get this automatically because they go for a run like I did today, and just like today, enough movement in the right kind of pacing, the right kind of difficulty, the right kind of traction of the eye movement will start to elicit neural receptors in your brain. And these is where a lot of good flow states come from. Now, a flow state is just a neurochemical response from physical action that allows you to be in a very specific state of consciousness. It's a quality of consciousness. It is not a quantity of it. And this is where a lot of people get wrong. There's a lot of, for years, almost a decade, people were enamored with flow states because they just wanted more and more and more. But it really isn't about more of it, because funny enough, it turns out the quantity of a flow state that goes beyond a certain point starts to look like schizophrenia, actually. And instead, I want these quality kind of infrequent bouts that I can control, that I can predict the outcome of. This is really what training does for us. So in understanding that my input in a gym or whatever run, if I give it the right prompting, that I need this kind of, maybe this kind of sound or music. Right today, I was just listening to a very down-tempo beat that was a little bit more relaxing, only because my recovery was really high, and I think I didn't want to risk just doing hard training that would become a quantitative measurement of how fast my run was with how much elevation gain or the speed of, the racetrack that I beat or whatever. I wanted a quality from the session. I wanted to produce something. And funny enough, this is the actual output. This idea on the very subject that I'm talking about is the consequence of my input, my prompting. I prompted it by starting the run, controlling the sound, controlling the tempo, controlling the pacing. I was even walking at some points, not because I was a quitter, but because I really wanted to control the quality of output. And sure enough, predictably between minute 37 and 49, which is where I usually have these kind of profound creative expressions after doing hard physical labor, it came out. I think today was at minute 36 or something like that. And so this really hit on the subject I was talking to last night. And I think it kind of, people get a giggle out of it because it's different from what they hear, but they really don't know how to apply it. And that is something I've worked really hard to try to explain to people. And sometimes I get it right, and sometimes I get it wrong. But this analogy has been really useful to me because, everybody's digging into artificial intelligence, although nobody's like talking about what they're using it for. Most people are just probably like using it to prompt generic ass fucking emails or replying to, text messages from people they fucking don't give a shit about. But I think, especially with the study coming out showing like deactivation of kind of like critical thinking from using AI systems, I think, yeah, there's always going to be a danger. Like the danger of creating an automobile was that we're not going to walk as much or something like that. But in essence, there's people who use these vehicles to produce more and do better work. And I think it's obvious those who are using artificial intelligence to improve themselves. I would just submit that, if you're willing to go down the rabbit hole of using AI to improve your life, there is so much more in the model that is your own intelligence. That model is much greater than any model or construct that comes out of Silicon Valley. And, before you just get stuck on this methodology, I would pressure people, like realistically, develop your methodology, sure. If it's weightlifting and it's quantitative, sure. But know that there's a greater model out there. And nobody can tell you what it is for you. You have to kind of discover it yourself. And the second somebody tells you what it is, understand that you're in somebody else's model. You're not in your own model. And therefore, you're kind of, you're stuck on somebody else's methodology as well. And the freeing part of this is understanding that if I try prompting myself in and out practice. This is basically training. They call it training artificial intelligence because you're prompting it, and machine learning is working because it's trying to understand what you are trying to get out of it. And the less conscious we are of it, the worse it works. But the same thing is true of our inputs and outputs just in our real life. Our autonomous intelligence needs accurate prompting. And so some concepts for you to think about prompting your training is thinking about, what you want out of it. It's goal-oriented kind of, but like what sensations do you want to feel? How do you want to behave after your training? Like I said today, the behavior trait that I was looking for was like a creative expression. But I could say, I want just focus, or I want, clarity, or I want, creativity or problem solving, or I can invert it. And maybe I just want a self-reflective quality like self-confidence or a sensitivity or something like that. All of this can happen with the right prompting. And realistically, like when you sit down for your next training session, just give yourself a prompt of what you want to get out of it as opposed to what you're trying to get through. And you will change the model almost from the get-go. And then it's your job to figure out what methodology works best for the model you're trying to achieve. So I hope that explained quite a bit. Just some thoughts off the top of my head.